Richard. Are you well?
I am very well, and I've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. I think it would be good for us to tell the story maybe of how this all came to be, right?
Sure.
So we met because we had one of your friends on our podcast.
Yep.
And then I reached out to you and we started to have conversations around fractional and interim and full-time CROs, because we'd seen in the marketplace that actually with cash flow being low, with the inflation being high, with valuations being lower than before and quite dramatically affected, particularly within tech, particularly within SaaS, the risk of making the wrong decision when hiring a CRO was so big for these businesses that actually if you could go and buy in some of that expertise with a fractional or potentially an interim expert to come into your business to help shape that strategy, then that could be a bit of a game changer. What was it about that conversation that you think made this such an interesting conversation for us to go and share with people who might be in that exact thought process?
I think particularly currently the recruitment market at all levels is a real challenge right now. So I think lots of organizations are asking themselves what alternative solutions they might have. I also think that a lot of the investment-backed businesses and investor businesses are looking at how they can get the most out of their investment as quickly as possible. They always do, right? Yeah. But now more so than ever. So I think that whole CRO, so the whole revenue line, sales and marketing effectiveness, alignment, sales and marketing proposition, driving growth through go-to-market strategy, all of that is front and center. And I think a lot of organizations and investors are asking themselves, what can we do to get results quickly? And I think that very quickly takes them to considering interim and fractional. So I think it's really relevant to the time right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had a conversation, didn't we, the other day about this. I saw a post recently from Sam Jacobs, who heads up Pavilion. And it talks about the modern role of a CRO is actually a chief customer officer, because your existing book of business is probably worth more than your net new customer acquisition in this marketplace. And it's very unlikely that if you're hiring like a first time CRO or promoting someone into that role, that they're going to have sales, marketing, customer success, account management experience. Incredibly unlikely they're going to find that mix. What's your thoughts towards that?
Yeah, I think you've got even less time now to get it right in terms of with your customers, not just what you deliver operationally and from a product and service point of view, but from how you manage those accounts and deliver customer experience. So I thought Sam's post was spot on. And I think that's what prompted a discussion with you and I around it. So I think the way that he positioned that and articulated it was absolutely spot on.
Yeah, exactly right. And we've seen loads of clients recently who have come to us and said, look, we were banking on these 3-year contracts giving us revenue for the next period of time. Suddenly we've had a 30% churn of our existing customer base. What do we do? So I think it's a massive pain point for businesses, not just startups looking to find market fit, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, as part of this conversation. But for some bigger businesses is, right, we need to make sure we've got all of those aspects of our whole revenue organization right, because we can't scale without having the right structure in place.
Yeah, and I think particularly around interim and fractional, I think a lot of businesses are struggling to recruit those full-time. They're struggling to do it full stop, but when they do it, it's taken longer. So the option of having an interim or fractional CRO or someone driving that whole lead gen and revenue line, they need more options to be able to get stuff done quickly. So I think that's driving higher demand for those contract roles.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. So we've already recorded the main conversation. So without further ado, let's roll the VT and let's get into this chat. Hello, Grant. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise with people. And whether it's investors who are looking for businesses to invest in, or maybe it's a founder who's thinking about how to go and scale their go-to-market engine, I hope this is going to prove to be a pretty valuable piece of content and provoke some interesting questions and answers that they might be able to ask inside the business. So for anyone that doesn't already know you, can you tell people a bit about the background that you have and the type of organizations that you typically help?
Sure. So my name's Grant Richardson. I am interim and fractional CRO. My background is fairly varied.
working on the basis that a moving target's more difficult to hit. I've changed roles many times in my career. So I did about 25 years in corporate, going right back to the start of my career. I went to college, university, and I did 4 years with BAE Systems. I then did 19 years with a company called Aggreko PLC. Great growth story. We grew the business from about 300 million to about 1.8 billion, 2000 to 2014, 15, thereabouts. So all of my instincts have always been built around growth and revenue growth, business unit growth, new product launch, new territory entry, new geography entry, just the whole 9 yards around growth and commercialization. In 2019, I transitioned into this interim CRO and fractional CRO portfolio, and really taking that strategy development, strategy planning, and hands-on strategy deployment piece that I learned in my corporate days, and applying that mostly within the VC and private equity backed sector, so investment-backed organizations. I've done a lot of SaaS. I've done a lot of technology type businesses over the past 4 or 5 years, and really focused on growth, driving growth, commercialization, and that could be startup or high growth phase businesses, but mostly been around technology and SaaS and some industrial services, which were linked to that sort of 20, 25 years that I did in industry, which was all industrial.
Yeah, sure. What I'm taking from that, Grant, is if you don't know, it's not worth knowing.
You could do that in half an hour's time.
Yeah, exactly. Please do vote at the end of how well you think it comes across. So there's so many different ways that we could skin this cat, but I think a really interesting way to think about it would be, let's talk about who might be paying attention to this and who might be listening. So what type of people do you think will be asking the question, do I hire a full-time, a fractional, or an interim chief revenue officer?
I think for that startup and high growth phase business, there's probably going to be two sets of people. There would be founders. So founders of private businesses who are looking to scale, have maybe got to the end of the runway in terms of their existing or previous go-to-market plan, but also the investor sector. So private equity, VC, looking to understand how they can accelerate growth within the companies they've invested in on their portfolio. So probably splits into those categories: owner, operator, private businesses, and investor-backed businesses, PE and VC. Those would probably be the two main groups.
Okay, cool. And then let's take the last few examples, projects that you've worked on. Where was that born out of in terms of their approach to you to go and solve those problems?
They've cut the first couple of interim roles that I did actually came initially from consulting assignments. So the very first interim role that I had was with a software consulting business. They had developed a brand new product, a new SaaS product that worked in conjunction with one of the world leading ERP platforms. And they wanted someone to come and pressure test the concept, understand the market better, and develop a go-to-market strategy for launch of that product. So it was completely a blank sheet of paper. So that was just out the box. We've got this product. We think it's got a fit in the market. We think there's potential. Can you help us work out if we're correct or not? And the great news was that they were absolutely correct. And after a 2 or 3 month after a 2 or 3 month consulting project, we had convinced ourselves there was absolutely a market there. They asked me essentially to step in as interim, it wasn't CRO at that point, it was interim sales and marketing director, and deliver year one of the plan. So that came from a consulting assignment. I then returned to that business about a year or so later, maybe a bit more after they had secured private equity funding. So they were then looking to develop what the growth phase of the plan looked like. So it was about understanding in more detail the market opportunity, developing the organization, the go-to-market and the value proposition and sales propositions, and getting the sales and marketing team aligned around those opportunities. So those came from consulting. But I also have had roles that have come via recruiters that have come to me. The last one that I did was specifically through a recruitment channel, and that was a 6-month interim CRO role for a tech tech manufacturing business with huge market opportunity, and they were looking for sales and marketing turnaround and driving essentially their sales pipeline to drive up the value of that sales pipeline, both the individual opportunity value and the total sales pipeline value. So they tend to come from places you don't expect. The recruiter that came to me with that particular one, we had never worked together before. I think we'd only ever communicated by email, perhaps on LinkedIn.
Sure.
And there just happened to be a fit. This came across his desk. He made the connection between what my profile said and what the client was looking for, and they made the call, and it worked. And it was very successful and very challenging, but very enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. So challenging, in fact, that you were down almost near where I live in the south coast of England, and you didn't realise you were next to one of the nicest beaches in the whole of Europe.
That's not my brightest moment. So yeah, I didn't realise that I was literally a stone's throw from Bournemouth Beach a couple of times a week when I was down there. Yeah, very odd. But I have looked afterwards online, and it looks incredible. Which I should say.
It's very less impressive on Google than in real life, but never mind. There's always this next role. Who knows? So let's talk about like where these assignments come from. So could you share a bit about what are the typical organizational pains and challenges that would necessitate either a full-time, a fractional, or an interim CRO?
Sure. I think if we stick with the startup or growth phase businesses, growth phase organizations, then to put a full-time, an FTE in place as a CRO, then they're likely to have grown to the point where permanent leadership is required at board level. Because a lot of businesses in the early stages, that tends to be represented by the founder or some senior sales leadership that's not necessarily board level. So if it grows to the point where it's clear that board presence is required, then they might go looking for full-time. The other things I've seen where businesses are looking to recruit full-time CRO would be if they have secured funding and perhaps the business is not yet revenue-wise at the stage of requiring a full-time CRO, but they can see that it's not too far in the future if the growth phase is as rapid as they expect it to be. So there's an over-investment in the role. Yeah. So they say, okay, we're going to put a CRO in place full-time, even though we possibly right now can't afford it. There's an investment required in the future. So that happens. But also, if a business just wants to invest in the commercial growth of the organization, they can see the market opportunity and they want someone that can come in and put the pieces of the puzzle together and drive growth by sales and marketing alignment, getting the sales and marketing messaging and propositions right. Then also that's a point at which they would go to market and bring in a full-time head, I would suggest.
Yeah, it makes sense. Because if you've got a product and you're not 100% sure if you have market fit yet, hiring someone who might fit your budget at this time but doesn't have the expertise, the reason why you might not find that market fit might be because of a lack of expertise, right? It might be because of blind spots that someone has. So you want the very best person, but maybe you just don't have the funding in place. Or maybe they're going, look, we can't yet commit all of this to the solution because we don't even know what that solution is going to look like. So I guess part of what you help people to do is determine what they are going to need when they reach the point at which they will require a full-time sales leadership team.
I think that's a really important point. What I've found is quite often, if it's an interim CRO role that the client is recruiting for, I think they have to accept that actually part of the reason for bringing that role in is to help them to answer some of those questions. If they're not quite sure organizationally where they need to go because they're not quite sure what the customers look like specifically or what the market opportunity is clearly, then it's better to spend the money on someone that can come and help you answer those questions for 3 to 6 months and also help you define what the full-time role looks like. So that's absolutely a great point. And I see that a lot. And there's a bit of there's a bit of a challenge there because it's hard to go into an interim CRO role knowing there are some questions still to be answered around the market fit, the market opportunity, because undoubtedly you will also have to try and deliver results quickly. So you need to be prepared for that. You need to know that although there's going to be a number of unknowns when you hit the ground, You're still going to have to make decisions quickly. You're still going to have to get the organization pointing in the right direction quickly, and you're going to have to nail the things that you are going to deliver in that 3 to 6 month period. And it's pretty high pressure. I don't know what it says about me, but I like that. Lots of difficult, conflicting stakeholder management. Don't know what it says about me, but I like that. I don't know why, but that CRO role, interim CRO role, is a challenge there because you have to answer the questions. You have to, what's the phrase? Build the plane as you're flying it. And there's a lot of expectation on results, not just on planning and strategy. And you need to be able to juggle both of those. But that's, as I say, don't know what it says about me, but I like that.
No, I think it says a lot. It says a lot about the type of person that someone would need to hire, because you're right. You couldn't just go for a expensive consultant who's going to go and give you this master plan, but then not be able to go and help you to start to implement it. Yeah. And you can't just go and get a ruthless executor who's going to go and act without questioning. So you have to be the challenger. Yeah. Because you have to probably change people's thinking and the way that they are seeing the problem. They might even not see the problem, right? You probably might be bringing that in front of their face, which is never a nice thing.
I think if you think about the phasing, in an ideal world, anyone that thinks they've got a great market opportunity but they're not quite sure how to tackle it would probably get one of those very cerebral consultants in to think about it, consider it, come up with a plan, then go looking for who's the perfect CRO to help us implement this. Most businesses don't have that luxury. They just don't. And my experience, and I've worked with some very good consultants, very expensive consultants, and my experience is you need to get the plan directionally correct, right? If you wait till you've got the perfect plan, you're never going to do anything. Yeah. When you go into that interim CRO role, you have to be comfortable that you're going to get it correct directionally, and then you're just going to get your foot on the gas and get it done. Now, in the stakeholder management piece at the front end of that, you have to be able to get it correct directionally, but then articulate it in a way that you can bring the business, the investors, the board, the team with you. So that there's a skill in that, and that whole sort of multi-stakeholder management piece is an art in itself. So you need to get all of that right very quickly. And then you just need to put your foot on the gas and accept you're going to get lots of it wrong, some of it right, and you just need to focus on the things that are going to make the biggest difference in the shortest period. I make it sound very simple.
No, it does sound simple, and I like to oversimplify things, which is part of how my brain works. But it sounds to me like you're describing: we're going to go and set the destination, we're going to fly this plane over here, but we need to do course corrections every sort of 10 clicks because we might be completely off track. We might not have the right fuel on board. We might not have the right cure. You're constantly adapting to get there, even though you know that's roughly where we need to end up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the pace that businesses, particularly investment-backed businesses, have to work at, there's no other way to do it. There is no other way to do it. And in corporate life, I have worked with consultants where you have a longer period where you can spend more of the time up front getting it more right. I would argue there's a very fast law of diminishing returns, I think, once you get into that kind of situation. You just have to get it roughly right and put your foot in the gas.
Yeah, it sounds to me like it's an agile approach. So if we're thinking like software development, it's an agile approach to go to market rather than this whole, like, let's build a Ferrari. You're building a skateboard, then you're building the bike, then you're building the car. Would that be fair?
No, I think that's fair. But I think often you are dealing with people who are expecting you to build a Ferrari very quickly, to use your analogy.
Yeah.
So there is a skill. There's a skill in making sure you get the important things as right as you possibly can.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. So we've got these three models. So we've got the full-time, fractional, and interim roles. Can you talk about how do those different models address the kind of unique pain points that the organization's likely to be experiencing?
Yeah, I think I touched on the full-time piece. So if it's FTE, then the business is either going to overinvest at a point they can't afford a full-time, but they want to commit to it because they know that the opportunity is there. But if it's interim or fractional, interim is, as we've just described, They're still trying to work out what the plan looks like. They might just have lost a CRO or a senior sales and marketing leader, and they need a ready-made leader that can step in, take control of the team, direct the team, manage the team, define the plan, and, as I say, put their foot on the gas and deliver the things that they say that they were going to deliver. Fractional is different, I think. I would draw a clear distinction between interim and fractional. Fractional, for me, is a part-time senior leader. So that could be in a situation where, let's say, a startup business has grown to the point where they're moving into growth phase. The sales leadership or sales and marketing leadership that are in place have got lots of potential. They know the market well, they know the team well, and they're performing well today based on where the business is. But they may need mentoring, coaching. They may need some additional support in developing the strategy and the direction further because they don't have the experience. And a fractional CRO can come in and essentially act as that coach, as that support to the day-to-day leadership. And the individuals can do, 2 or 3 of those roles. They might do a couple of days a week or a day, whatever it might be in 2 or 3 different organizations. And I guess if it's a business that has some either strong or potentially strong leadership in place already, and they can't necessarily afford to or don't want to displace that, they will bring in a fractional CRO, as I say, to bring that experience, that track record, that additional insight, and to potentially bring more to the table in terms of strategy, insight, and direction. And it may be that the person or the people that they come in to manage will be developing over a period of time into the next CRO or the next sales marketing director, next sales director, or wherever it might be. And there's a cost benefit to that, right? So they're not having to pay full whack to have that level of experience 5 days a week. And if the team that they have in place is capable of responding to that type of setup, then there's a lot of benefits particularly for a fairly early stage organization.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think we're seeing this more and more. Obviously, people like yourself, I've got some other people who work on the marketing side of the equation. I know you've got both, but it's a really attractive thing to do when you've learned your base of skills and you've got a bunch of experience. If you can go and help multiple businesses on your time frame, you don't have to be fully committed, like you say, moving down to the South Coast for 6 months to go and execute. It's good for you and it's good for businesses because they can tap into that. It's almost like getting cloud infrastructure. We can tap into this resource as and when we need it and do a deal that works for both sides. So that's a really interesting approach. We've seen it happen quite a lot in marketing. My old CEO for Bolt Digital was an amazing lady called Natasha Courtney-Smith, and she acted as a fractional CMO for quite a few brands. And the impact that you're able to have is huge. What's your preference? Or how would you determine whether interim or fractional would be your preference for a specific opportunity?
I love the variation. There was a period of about 18 months where I did fractional. I did 2 or 3 different fractional roles. And I love the variety. I love the challenge around the more strategic and planning and direction and higher level stuff. I mean, when you can have a mix of 2 or 3 different businesses, when I did it, it was two in a very similar sector and one kind of outlier. So it was really interesting. And all of those businesses had middle management leadership that were able to implement, if you like, with direction and support. So that's interesting. I like the variety of that. However, again, I don't know what it says about me. I also like getting my hands dirty and making things happen. Right down to in interim CRO roles, I have found myself writing copy for web pages and getting involved in sales support materials and making sure the value proposition has been properly articulated and all of that stuff. Dealing with team challenges, dealing with management issues, dealing with leadership challenges, reorganizations, recruitments, the opposite of recruitments, all of that stuff. So the latter, so the interim CRO piece, I get really engaged in. And that's what it was like for the one on the South Coast. And it was it was an exciting business to be part of because there was so much opportunity. And to do the interim CRO as opposed to fractional, so 5 days a week, often more, is really engaging. And I really enjoy that. So both for me, so speaking selfishly, I like both. I enjoy both. I've done both. If you were to say which would you pick, probably interim, full time, 5 day a week interim with the right businesses, because it's engaging. You're all in. And what I like about it is, and I actually do this whether it's interim or fractional, I approach a business, even though I'm a contractor, I approach it as if I've just landed the job, as if I'm a full-time employee. Sure. The 20 years that I spent I did 25 years, but the 20 years that I did with Aggreko PLC, that was 20 years of all in, wearing the badge, 24 hours a day, shoulder to the wheel, living and dying by the success of all of that stuff that was exciting and engaging and I got passionate about. I take the same, whether it's fractional or interim, I take that into it as well. Yeah. If you're struggling to choose between the two, but if you said I've got these 3 fractional roles you can take now, Grant, or I've got this one interim role, take your pick. I'd probably take the interim just because it suits me. It fits with my approach, if you like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. It makes sense. It's good that you can do both. Some people listening to this might be speaking to might only have a preference around one, or might be committed to other things. So I think there's commitment on both sides, right? In terms of you are able to and to fully commit yourself into something that you're the right person to go and solve. But for some people, and it might just be maybe you start fractional and then you go interim, right? It doesn't have to be one or the other, does it?
Yeah.
But I guess there's that. The other side is financials. So if you're talking from the client's perspective or the PE's perspective, there is budget considerations, and financial considerations that go into it. So thinking from their perspective, what would you say would be some of those considerations and questions that they might ask themselves to determine which model they might go and find the person who's best to deliver it would be?
I think they would have to ask themselves what capability they had in their team. So I think they'd have to take a long, hard look at the sales and marketing capability within their organization. So that's going to be a key consideration. Because if they have high potential but inexperienced sales and marketing leadership, fractional might work, or a short interim, then fractional, and then someone in the team may be able to step up in 18 months, 2 years to become the CRO, then that might work for them. And the other thing is, I guess they need to look at what their investment plan is. If it's likely, depending on whereabouts on the growth journey the business is, it's likely, I would suggest, that an investment-backed business is probably going to have to pay more than they can afford out of cash flow to be able to bring in an experienced interim CRO. Probably the way it is. So they have to view it as an investment as opposed to an operational cost. And it's up to the CRO to demonstrate the value they're going to bring. So they're going to have to articulate, here's what I'm going to do in 3 to 6 months. Here's quantitatively what I'm going to deliver. Here's qualitatively what I'm going to deliver in terms of reorg or whatever it might be. So I think they probably have two key questions. What's the capability that we have in our team, in our retained on the books team? And are we able and willing to invest beyond cash flow to be able to bring in a CRO that's going to get us from point A to point B? And are we clear on what that point B looks like? I think those are probably the key questions. If I were in that position, that's what I'd be asking myself.
That's a good way of thinking about it, right? I think another interesting thing that you've said is you would see it as part of your responsibility to demonstrate that value. So if someone's in between the two and they're going, look, we don't really have the budget, but maybe if this is an investment, would you see it then as your responsibility to help to build the business case that would demonstrate the ROI of having you on an interim basis? And how much of that would fall with them?
If I had the opportunity, and those are the kinds of conversations that I have had in advance of taking an interim role. Quite a lot of the time, those kind of discussions have been had before they even go to market, before they even go to the market to bring somebody in. So before they brief a recruiter or warm up their network, generally those are the kind of conversations that have already been had. But in the interview process for the roles, then I do see it as my responsibility to share where I think they can go. It's part of the gig, right? And you have to say, I understand your market space. I understand where you are right now in your growth journey. Here's where I think the key, from what you've told me and what I've researched, here's what I think are the key areas that need focus. However, in the first 2 weeks, we can agree if that's correct or not. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But a lot of those conversations would be had before a candidate gets even spoken to.
Yeah, exactly. And then you'll sanity check if that thinking's right. It's the same in our world. We often get told this is what we're looking for. But when you really take the time to unpack the impact that they're looking to achieve, often the solution is quite different than what they've gone to market for. But that's half of the value of partnering with an expert, right? Is that you can get sensible advice around what's the right way to get to the outcome, even if that is a bit of brutal truth feedback on their side that it might be the incorrect brief.
It's difficult. It must be difficult for investors or businesses recruiting for this type of role, because they have to accept that part of the reason they're recruiting is to answer some of the questions they don't have the answers to. As a recruiter, you must feel that as well. If you're not quite sure exactly what's required and you're talking to candidates, it makes it's a slightly a leap of faith once you make a call on it. You have to say, okay, the person's a fit. We think culturally they'll fit the organization. We think they get it. We think they understand where we're at. And we think they'll help us to answer the questions in the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks to define what the plan looks like for that 3 to 6 months. Because in any business, 3 to 6 months isn't really a long time. And interim can become 9 months. And even that, particularly, as you will know, in the recruitment world, when you're recruiting for senior execs, if someone comes into an interim role to hit the ground running, immediately take control and direction of the sales and marketing function, whilst a recruitment project's going on in the background, it might be 6 months before they find the permanent candidate. And then it might be 3 months before they start. So there you've burned your 9 months with your interim CRO already. It's not a long period of time. So I think there's a bit of do your diligence from both sides, for the candidate and for the recruiters. Do your diligence. You just have to find someone you think is a fit and have some confidence and trust in what they've said, that they can come in and help you work out what needs done. Now, that's a difficult position to be in. And I'm very cognizant of that when I'm talking to potential clients.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think people often underbat the amount of time it's going to take, but you're absolutely right. We've touched on hiring there, and obviously we've talked about budgets. And if you look at like the kind of project management triangle, we've got time, money, and risk. So if we talk about the challenges and risks that people might make when they're hiring a CRO, could you talk us through what are the most common challenges and risks that someone might face in that CRO hiring process, and of course, how best they might overcome them?
So challenges and risks in the process or in the selection, or what do you mean specifically?
Yeah, exactly. The hiring process. It could be, we've talked about which is the right model based on where they're at, but what are some of the best ways that they can overcome the most common challenges and risks in hiring a CRO?
Okay. I think looking for evidence that, if it's an interim role, looking for evidence that interim CRO is comfortable operating as part of the team and not as a consultant. I think, as we talked about previously, it's not just a consulting and planning and strategic review type role. It has to be someone who's got a long track record or a successful track record, I think, as being an employee, and then have moved into this interim role because, for all the reasons we've discussed previously. So I think not just looking for the functional experience and the functional fit and the knowledge and market knowledge and all of that. I think a sense that they are able to integrate with and become part of a business very quickly. Because as we said, even if it was 9 months, which is at the sort of upper end of an interim contract duration, it's not a long period of time. And if it's someone that takes 3 or 4 months to get their head around the business and integrate with the team, you're getting on for halfway through the engagement already if it's a 9-month gig. So I think being very diligent around understanding that this person is used to operating within a business as an employee. They just happen to have chosen to become an intern. I think that would be one part. I think some of the other challenges are around, I think, accepting the unknowns, accepting that you will not necessarily know all of the things that you want them to do when they land. Accepting that, I think, is important. And so recruiting not just based on their ability to do, but their ability to think and answer questions and work out quickly what the important buttons are to push and all that type of stuff. So I think that would be, I think those would be two key ones: the ability to integrate and operate as if they were an employee very quickly, and the ability to come in and quickly diagnose what needs done, agree the plan, and then just get their foot down and get on with it.
Yeah,
does that
make sense? And if we talk about, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, and if we talk about de-risking, so how are the ways that you've seen businesses de-risk their decision? Obviously, there's different risks in terms of full-time, fractional, and interim. What ways have you seen people de-risking that decision?
Short notice periods are fairly brutal way of de-risking the recruitment.
Sure.
Seen that a few times. I don't know. What do you think of that? Because, as I say, I'm just overtly pragmatic, but I'm not sure. Certainly, from an interim and fractional point of view, I'm not sure how much you can de-risk it. You have to have a diligent process. You have to be clear on the cultural fit. You have to have a very good idea of what your market opportunity is. So you have to have all of those things in mind. But I'm not sure what specifically, apart from what we've discussed already, they could do to de-risk the decision. I'm not trying to evade the question. I'm just trying to think through what might be.
No. Maybe it is in itself de-risking, right? Because if you're bringing in someone on a fractional interim basis, it is almost like a try before you buy.
Yeah.
So it does do it. And if you're using the recruitment process to see how they would do things like producing business places, business cases, showing how they would integrate throughout the team, what their approach would be, their track record, they're bringing evidence. And if you're having to force them to bring evidence, it's probably a big red flag. Whereas if they're the ones going, here are some of the risks, here are the questions, and you learn through the process before you've even started engaging properly things that you didn't know before, that's probably a great sign that they're a right fit.
No, I think you're spot on. I think in a way, and to an extent, bringing in an interim kind of de-risks the full-time employee recruitment, right? Help to define exactly what you want, see what fits and what doesn't. Even if someone comes in and they don't fit, well, then at least you know why. So I think the interim approach is part of a de-risk strategy for before you go and bring an FTE in. And the same, to an extent, possibly for fractional, with the added benefit with fractional that there's a cost saving. You can spend a bit less money. You could try a few different fractionals over a period and help them. They can help you to come to the answer of what you need permanently. Yeah, I'm not sure I've answered that particularly well for you, but I just think maybe I would say this, but for anyone recruiting interim or fractional CRO, there's always a level of risk in any recruitment, right?
Sure.
And things like diligent referencing.
Yeah.
I've seen that a lot. I've experienced that a lot in terms of interim, which particularly with private equity and investment-backed businesses that have investors that they have to satisfy. I think that's the usual things that you would do for...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you're not buying a product, it's people. So there's risk on both sides. So I think understanding that it's a really good process for someone like you, because you don't have to fully commit to a full-time role. You can see if you work with people well, and if you can help to move the needle and you can help to make the sort of impact that you can do before you go and take that leap.
I mean, sorry, I was about to answer a question you hadn't asked me. Is that all right?
Yeah, go for it. You're preempting. I love it.
I don't know why this sprung to mind, but one of the challenges I find, and this was especially true in my last interim role, because I go all in, interim or fractional, I actually found it really tough to walk away from the last role because I heavily invested in it emotionally and wanted it to work and put a lot of time and effort, missing Bournemouth Beach in the process. It was tough. It was tough when that came to an end. So I guess I'm reflecting slightly on your question about is it interim or fractional you prefer. The benefit of fractional is, you can do fractional for a much longer period, is my experience. You could do 2 or 3 different roles for 18 months maybe, bit more, 2 years sometimes. I know people that have been doing fractional roles for businesses on and off for numbers of years. So you're part of the team, part of the business. Interim can't be like that. It just, once you get beyond 6-9 months, I think you're getting to the point where you're going to start overstaying your welcome. So that would be an unexpected, for me, downside is 6 or 9 months of working my ass off for something that I joined because I believe they've got an opportunity and I'm proud of what we've achieved and are continuing to achieve. Walking away from that's difficult. It's just difficult. And I found that tough with the last, especially with the last one.
Yeah, like we said, it's people, right? And you have emotions. And I think that emotions is what makes it powerful, that care and that ownership. And obviously you've integrated, right? In that last role, you integrated with the team in a certain way. And I suppose that's a really interesting point. Obviously, what you've talked about, not wanting it to end, is a great sign that it was good. What would you say are the potential challenges that people might face when they're integrating a new CRO? And how could they mitigate those challenges so that they do have that sort of emotional buy-in that they're looking for?
Do you mean an interim?
Just generally, in terms of bringing a CRO in, what would you say are the potential integration challenges that a business might face when bringing a CRO into the organization?
I think it depends on the nature of the business. Obviously, a SaaS business is different from a manufacturing business. But what I've seen, and I've seen this in corporate, and I've seen this with investment-backed businesses, a lack of integration with the operational capability of the business, or lack of understanding by the CRO of the operational capability of the business, excuse me, can cause big problems. It's not that often that the sales and marketing function drives so much demand that the operational part of the business can't keep up, but it does happen. It happened regularly. When I was with Aggreko, we were growing massively year on year. And if that revenue and lead gen and opportunity creation part of the business becomes detached from the operational part of the business, I think you can start to see cracks appear. So that can be a challenge. It's a good problem to have, creating too much demand. I've also seen businesses where it's the opposite problem. But I think an acknowledgement of the role of the CRO by the board and at board level, whether it's full-time, interim or fractional, I think that's important. And I think it is incumbent on the person, as I say, full-time, interim or fractional, to make sure that they are clear with all the stakeholders what their role is, what their objectives are, what they're working towards, what their priorities are. And that's when you're working in big corporates, stakeholder management becomes second nature. It's slightly political in corporates, but not so much in smaller businesses. But I think stakeholder management and communication, it sounds glib to say it, but you need to get those two right. Because even in launch and growth phase businesses, investment-backed businesses, there are a number of stakeholders with a number of competing priorities, and you need to make sure you're alive to those and managing them.
Yeah.
Because in an interim role, and again, I don't know what it says about me, but I like it, you're always on trial. I joked about notice periods, but you're not going to get 3 months notice period if it's not working. It just doesn't happen. So you need to be all over your stakeholder management, all over your communications internally, and all over your numbers. It sounds, but you don't get much time. You don't get much time to prove yourself, and if it's going wrong, you don't get much time to turn it around. So you need to be all over those.
Yeah, sure.
And if that answers your question, that's the way a CRO needs to integrate with an organization.
Yeah. And let's talk about those measures of success then. So how should a business and how can a business accurately measure and evaluate how successful a CRO has been?
Again, I think it comes down to where they're at. So if a business has got a steady customer base that they think is the right customer base, they're just not getting the right share of wallet, then some strong metrics around key account management and account revenue growth, for example, would be important. If a business has a sales and marketing function that's for some reason gone off the rails and the sales pipeline's just either not where it should be or is declining, then some key metrics around lead gen, opportunity conversion ratios, average opportunity values, total sales pipeline value, weighted value, all of that stuff. So it really depends on what the specific challenge is that the business is facing. And coming back to your question earlier, so that's why it's important when a CRO hits the ground full-time, interim or fractional, they very quickly identify what the key problems are that need fixed, because then you can agree some reasonable and realistic metrics in terms of measure. You might struggle to agree realistic in terms of what the targets actually are, but you can quite quickly identify, okay, sales pipeline needs work here, right? Let's agree that in the next 3 to 6 months, we'll take the sales pipeline value from X to Y and the average op value from A to B. And so it's all about diagnosing the problems quickly in that initial probably 2 to 4 weeks. You don't get long.
Yeah.
You don't get long.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about those pitfalls. What would you say are the major pitfalls in aligning a CRO strategy with the overall organizational goals, and how can they be avoided?
Again, this may sound simple. I think there is a challenge, a challenge if a CRO lands and they are expected to develop a sales and marketing strategy when there is no overall business strategy, right? And I would say the two are not the same. Sales and marketing strategy is part of your business strategy. Again, sounds obvious, but I've seen a number of times, not just in what I do now, but in corporate, where a sales leader, a senior sales leader, a sales leadership team, and sales and marketing leadership team are tasked with, okay, revenue's down or could be better. What we're going to do about it? You can't do that in isolation. You can, but it can lead to problems. So I think you need to have, again, it goes back to the link to the operational strategy, what operational capabilities the business is creating, what new products it might be bringing, what product development or new services might be added, what territories might be included in the overall strategy. So I think being clear that a sales and marketing strategy is only effective if it's part of an overall business strategy is probably the first thing I would say. Do you think that's right?
Yeah, I think so. And then it comes back to what you said earlier, which is if the CRO is so focused on revenue growth, but the business can't keep up, then that breaks. So you're that understanding of the operational delivery and what is going to keep customer success and customer happiness at a high.
Yeah.
So it doesn't break when you start to open the floodgates is another key thing, because there's nothing worse than being so focused on new business that you ruin your existing stack.
Yeah, and I think it's critical, particularly in, businesses of, say, 1 to 10 million, that the sales team can touch and feel the product development strategy. They're aware of what's happening if it's software, within the software development team and what's coming down the line, what's the roadmap. Same for manufacturing and tech businesses, because a lot of the time, by the very definition of the fact that they've gone through startup phase and they're just about to hit growth phase, then a lot of products and services are still in development. So it's not like I know I have X product on the shelf as a sales guy and I'm going to go sell it. It might be, I know I've got a version of that I can sell to somebody once I define the solution and understand the requirements.
Yeah.
Who do I speak to help me work out how I can sell that properly and what we can actually deliver? That requires a level of integration between functions. It also requires a level of overall strategy, whether it be software development roadmap, tech product manufacturing roadmap, whatever it might be. You can't. I have seen a number of times over the years where we've got a revenue problem. Let's get a CRO or a senior. Let's promote somebody and they can fix the revenue problem for us. And they don't fix any of the infrastructure, the operational issues, the product development issues, and it just causes mayhem and stress and doesn't work.
Yeah.
So business integration, functional integration between the different business functions, I think is critical for that.
So let's almost summarize everything that we've talked about in terms of some phases that people can go through. So if we think about the investor or the founder and they're in the process of going, we've got the problem, how are we going to go and solve it? Do we go fractional, do we go interim, or do we go full-time? What are some of the first things that they should be considering before they make that decision?
Okay, first of all, what stage are we at? What stage are we at as a business in terms of growth? Are we at an early stage where we need someone to come and help us work out what a permanent solution looks like? If so, then it's going to be fractional or interim. Are we at the stage where we've done the research, the strategy planning, and we understand the market opportunity, and we know we're going to go and have to overhire? We can't afford a full-time CRO right now, but we know that we're going to start to grow rapidly, and with the courage of our convictions, we're going to go and spend it as an investment and not an operational cost. I'd be asking myself that. But again, I would also ask, what capability do we have in the team today? So do we think that everyone's reached their ceiling, therefore we need to bring in a permanent person to lead that team? Or do we think there are people within the organisation, it might be a head of sales who could step up to CRO, head of marketing who could step up to CRO, and do they just need some guidance, mentoring and development to be able to move into that role? And at the same time, we can get some additional strategy and market insight and experience that then you're into interim or fractional. So what stage are we at and what capability do we have in our team today?
Okay, brilliant. So if we think about this in terms of the kind of classic project management triangle, and you've got the amount of time that we have, the amount of money that we can invest, and the quality that we want to do this to, what are some of the questions they should be asking themselves about which is the right way forward in terms of their CRO strategy?
I think they need to ask themselves how confident they are in their view of the market. Now, if they've had someone in place for a period who is either a consultant or maybe even the existing head of sales and marketing or whatever, who has developed a clear understanding of the market and the opportunity, and they are absolutely convinced of the direction of travel, then I guess they either go and spend money on a very experienced interim CRO that can come and hit the ground running quickly and make things happen quickly, and or then they go and recruit a full-time person. They either bring the interim CRO in because nobody's got enough time or too much time, so they're going to want to start moving in the right direction quickly. So interim CRO and start the search for the full-time, the full-time candidate. That'd be if they were very confident in the direction of travel. I think if they were not so confident in the direction of travel, then they might want to go look at bringing it, but they had some decent, solid team members, head of sales and marketing. They might then want to go and find a fractional that can come and help them answer those questions. Then when they're clear on the direction of travel, they could bring an interim and go look for the full-time. In an ideal world, it would be very sequential. You would say, okay, first of all, we're going to bring in a fractional CRO to help us shape up our plan and understand the market and develop the team a bit. Okay, 6 months of that, 9 months of that. Then we're going to bring in a full-time CRO to really start moving forward. And once that interim CRO has delivered for 6 to 9 months, then we're going to go to the market and bring in a full-time person. It doesn't work like that. No business I've ever spoken to that needs a CRO or a CCO or CMO or whatever thinks, we've got about 2 years to get this right. Nobody thinks like that. Nobody thinks like that. I think it's really how confident are they in the direction of travel. If they're very confident, they can get to that full-time CRO as quickly as possible, probably via an interim. If they're not so confident in the direction of travel, probably fractional to help them work out the plan, then either straight to full-time or interim.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think that if these businesses are even thinking about that stage of growth, there's probably some kind of massive market opportunity they're going after. And that's either been driven by a compelling event, or they genuinely have this opportunity in the market that they can win a race to go and be first.
Yep.
Or they need to go and set up themselves to go and reach that next level of growth. And they need to go and buy in the expertise, because if you try and scale without the right foundations, like you said, and you try and scale marketing and you try and scale sales without the right infrastructure in place, the whole thing's going to crumble anyway, and you'll never win that race.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. If someone wanted to get hold of you and they were thinking, I would love to have a conversation with you about where we can take our business, what's the best way they can reach out to you?
Get me on LinkedIn. Grant Richardson is a good place to start. Or get me at grant at ardaninsite, ARDANINSIGHT.com, grant at ardaninsite.com.
Amazing. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Grant. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Richard. Great to see you.